seat taken?
Nobody's in the seat, then I ain't taking, son.
So this is, Sabacc?
Sabacc.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to First Cut. This is our review of Andor Episode 8. Sabacc the Block is in the house breaking down Andor. I'm here with RB3 in the house. Every week is another dope episode. I feel like this one is no different. Another dope episode with a lot of commentary inside the shortened time span that we have in an hour episode block, but we still got so much communicating within it. RB3, I want to hear your thoughts on Episode 8.
Yeah, just another outstanding episode of Andor. Again, like you said, it continues to touch on heavy social themes. Last week they touched on police brutality, police profiling, racial profiling, and this week I think it landed really heavy on the topic of private prisons, the prison industrial complex, what comes with, prisoners being employed to make devices and all this kind of stuff, and the consequences of that, the high rates of suicides that we see in prison, all these really high-minded, deep concepts that you don't really see explored in science fiction or in cinema in general, but they tackle it head first in the Star Wars show, and that's what makes it even more outstanding.
And that's what Star Wars has always been about. Star Wars has always been about commenting on certain issues and bringing a light inside this like futuristic sci-fi fantastical world where the technology and the type of futuristic stuff we see is like very possible in our future. Like when I saw that prison stuff, I was like, this could happen in the near future when it comes to the type of prison industrial complex that we see. And when it comes to the I don't know what to call it, the competition capitalization of prisoners and how everything is becoming a reward system, and if you're in last place you get fried is what they call it, or electrocuted, and if you're in first place you live another day and you get to move on, and everything is about the next day and surviving the next day, and the days start to blend together, but it forces you to become hyper competitive to the point that your punishment is actually physical pain. How'd you feel about the idea of being electrified and how the entire prison is literally an electrocution cage?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that goes directly to the older form of capital punishment that they used to use, not really in like a lot of places anymore, but like the electric chair, right? And how that's kind of used to that was used to kill people and execute people, and that was considered the most painful way of death, and that was part of the reason and the motivation of why they used that as a form of corporal punishment, to set an example for prisoners not wanting to do that anymore. So and and the way they instituted here is almost like they're training the prisoners, almost like they're dogs. When they put like a little electric leashes on dogs or training animals, and you're trying to train them, it's almost like they're doing that, but almost to a human extent. And yeah, the futuristic prison in and of itself, the floors, how they're like sensitive, almost like in like other kind of sci-fi thriller movies, it might be like a laser floor kind of situation. And this one, they don't even show you or what exactly happens when they hit that red light floor level. I assume it's some sort of level of frying or like an extreme level of it, but yeah, it goes to all the different pains and obstacles that prisoners have to deal with when they're faced with punishment, and how there's like that constitutional amendment that like prevents us from like cruel and unusual punishment. But yeah, most punishment in prisons, in United States prisons, are cruel and unusual.
And it's also showing you the idea of competition with each other to the point of stepping on top of one another, right? Where it's this kind of, like I said before, capitalistic nature of like, get ahead of the next guy, otherwise you're going to be in last, and if you're in last you're going to get electrocuted. And it's always this competition where Andy Serkis's character, which I thought was a fun cameo, comes out and says, hey, I'm in competition with the managers of the other rooms and you're in competition with the other guys in the table, but either way everyone is trying to step on everyone. So if you don't do your job, I'll look bad, and if I look bad, then I'm going to come in last place. So it's literally this chain effect of like everyone is affecting everyone, and everyone is being cruel to everyone else in order to get what they want, which is just to survive the day without getting fried. I thought
Yeah.
that was just insane. Just the entire prison stuff was insane.
Well, and then, you know, just even going to like that chain of command, that's just an overall, like, you know, super capitalistic, like you said, way of approaching the workplace and a way of approaching just life in general. And, you know, even people who haven't been to prison or haven't been to have had that experiences could very still easily relate to, you know, how Andy Serkis was. There's literally a moment where Andor was just chilling for like 1 second because their machine was malfunctioning a little bit, and Andy Serkis comes right over his shoulder like, "Oh, are you just going to take a breather? You're not going to work?" And I know for a fact that is exactly how the workplace goes. That's exactly how some workplaces I've been in have gone. That's exactly how everybody has that experience. So it's real. I mean, it's, you know, the capitalism of it is what that's what is the overarching theme of like the entire show, and that's kind of like the worker bee mentality of it. But I love that in the context of this prison, it's like hyper exaggerated and hyper focused on like only being the worker bee with less with less access to food, water, and resources and freedom that you would normally have on the outside, and you're in prison and you're forced into it. It's really it's new era slavery, and that's really what I think they really play on here. And the private and prison industrial complex is, that's something that, if you read books like The New Jim Crow and things of that nature, they talk about how a lot of times they throw in Black and brown people into prisons for drug crimes, nonviolent drug offenses, and petty crimes for extended periods of times, and mandatory minimum sentences, just to have them work for cheap. Like there's a whole department, like there's a bunch of people who in California, we face a lot of wildfires, and a lot of the people who fight those wildfires are prisoners who are staying in San Quentin. So it's just like, it's a very real thing that, like, yes, that like in a capitalistic world, the workplace is going to be hyper competitive and all chains of command are going to be competing with each other. But it's even more amplified in the prison world because there's even more incentive, because there's less money, there's less people to pay for it. Like there's no labor to pay for it. Everybody's a slave essentially.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because if you can, that resentencing order thing now, and that heavy hand that the empire is doing in this world, now that you can kind of put anyone behind prison for any reason, just for looking at you some type of way, now that you can do that, that's even more cheap labor, and that's even more forced labor, and that's even more slaves basically for the empire to create weapons and to create technology that's above their pay grade and that's above their level. Because if you have all this cheap labor and cheap stuff that you can just put into it, then you can create the unimaginable, and you can create the kind of Death Star technology and the kind of Death Star weaponry that we see in A New Hope and that we see obviously in Rogue One. But that's a really good idea, because that's exactly what capitalism forces you to do, right? To go as cheap as possible. And now what's cheaper than just actual slaves who work inside a prison, who you say are enemies of the empire, but are clearly not. So it's an incredible commentary for what they're doing inside this.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just think, and I think Tony Gilroy, again, and all the crew, I'm just not even crediting Tony Gilroy, the entire crew and the entire writers team behind this show is really nailing the perspective of the empire, the perspective of the oppression inside of the prison complex and outside of the prison complex too, because I feel like as they're tightening the grip on the outside and people are feeling that from, Andor getting arrested to when we go back on Ferrix to everybody, freaking out about it, you start to see there's a real correlation and a real parallel happening all across the universe.
And what better way to sow allegiance, right? Even if it's fake allegiance, than to threaten people with that type of punishment, when the punishment is that severe. And that's what you fear that you could become if you start to question the empire a little too much. We see that in the cocktail party that Mon Mothma has as well, when people start to talk about, like, is he going too far? Is this too much? And then the guy's like, well, if you got nothing to hide, then I don't mind. Like, that's the kind of ideology that they want to put inside of you, because if you don't have that start to question even just a little bit, then those are the kind of thoughts that lead to eventually being questioning the emperor's involvement of cruelty with anyone literally doing nothing. And I love the scene where Andor is like, I didn't do anything. And the guy's like, yeah, we got a lot of those people nowadays, because that's what's happening now. It's like they put people behind bars for no reason. Again, like you said, just like the real world, literally for just the smallest little bit of weed that anyone can have on them. In some states, they can go behind bars for a long ass time. And it's cruel and it's very unusual. And that's the type of punishment that, you know, these kind of industrial complexes and prison complexes and capitalistic natures want to develop, because the more the prisons become a profit company, the more prisoners you'll see behind those bars. So it was just absolutely incredible in my opinion. But I want to jump to Luthen this episode, because last week we got a little bit of Luthen and Clea doing their scheming and doing their deeds, and we got even more of that in this episode. And RB3, we agreed on last week. I don't know if you're still with me. I'm still on Team Luthen, and I'm still on Team Clea. I love everything they're doing right now. They were talking about, obviously, trying to shut down Ferrix so that they won't have a connection there. But we also, and I know you just recently watched this, saw Luthen go to SAW. And we saw that when he was trying to get him to listen to his buddy, and SAW wants none of it. And he doesn't want to hear about working with another guy because of the different ideologies. What do you think of this scene? I thought this scene was crazy.
Well, yeah, that was interesting. I mean, I thought with what we saw, I thought he was a lot more extreme, you know, going into this episode. I thought he would be the more extreme version of Luthen. But I think at least in this chronological story, or I don't know what they're leading to so far, but it seems like he's not really trying to step too far outside of the lines. Like he's trying to play it strong, and he's still trying to build his empire, but he's still trying to like protect his people. Whereas I feel like the SAW GERRERA that we see in Rogue One is a lot more reckless. Like he was really just go down in flames. And I think they even indicate that a little bit. Like Forrest Whitaker's haircut is a lot nicer in this one than it was like in Rogue One, almost implying like, oh, he's a lot more sane now than he will be sometime down the line. But yeah, it's funny. The differences in ideology is something that real world politics, especially and on the left, is something that continues to divide people to this day, especially when you talk about the progressives versus the moderates versus the centrists versus, you know, the neoliberals. Like there's never going to be any kind of agreement on the left. Whereas that's why the right is so powerful. And that's why people, you know, the empire and, you know, all these things are so powerful, because there is one united front. There's almost like a kind of allegiance behind the empire. And they touch on that a lot when we see, you know, our guy, Cyril and Homegirl pop back up again too. But yeah, the whole division of how approach, the whole division of approach, because everybody agrees on the same thing. The empire is bad, how we're going to end the empire, but it's just how we're going to approach it is always like the disagreeing factor.
And it's interesting because the way I understood that scene was that Saul wants to keep his group small on purpose, because he wants to keep people around him he trusts. And that's why he's like, I can't risk my guys. That's my guys. That's my group. That's my gang. Those are my homies. Like, I don't want to expand. I don't want to recruit. Like, that's what Luthen wants to do. He wants to recruit. He wants to get people upset. He wants to get people riled up and be like, yo, let's take up arms. Let's do something. Let's start some stuff. And Saw is like, no. Like, I want people who were already committed. I want people who don't need to have encouragement and don't need to be riled up, who already riled up and who already have it in their heads that they want to go against the empire. He wants people who are committed to the cause, basically like from birth to death. Like, that's how I read it, is like he wants like hella committed people and not just like kind of committed, you know, just recently turned, like the kind of Cassian character would be. And Luthen wants to recruit more and more people and expand this rebellion. And it's interesting because they named all the type of rebels in this scene, and I thought that was kind of cool, where he's like partisans, rebels, this and that, and all the names that the empire has for them. And it's interesting because there's, like you said, it's all this different titles and subgroups and categories, and there's not just one united rebel front. There's all different ideologies and terms of commitment. which is something that Luthen is fighting against, even with Mon Mothma, because Mon Mothma wants to do the peaceful path as well and do the secretive path, whereas Luthen wants to do a little bit more harsher. So I don't know. I thought it was incredible talking about the levels of all that, but at the end of the day, it's tough, right? Because we see Saul's reasoning is that the guy he's talking about is someone who has awful ideology and who's someone who oppresses other people or who has oppressed other people in the past. And that's why he doesn't want to work with him, because he feels like that's going against his own ideology and his morals and his standards. So do you see like there's a reasoning for that, or do you feel like there's a clear winner in this debate?
No, I mean, I think they both have like very fair reason. You know what I mean? I think Luthen approaches it in a very much like, I hate to say it, but almost like in a very like, I guess like politically, like, I guess like, I don't want to say like Trumpian, you know, because like that's not the right comparison, but like a very much like ham-fisted, like let's get as many, like the most people-pleasing kind of like politician like as possible, you know, and the kind that wants to overthrow the empire by any means necessary while still having like a good amount of people behind him. Whereas Saul is more, you know, more of like insular, more of like the quiet kind of leader at this point, at least. So it's like, who's making the more rational calls? It's kind of funny because Clea almost implies that Lucian's not really acting rationally, like at this point, you know, like with him still chasing after Andor and still having like this obsession after the Garrison attack. It's almost like, was he still trying to chase from this point? So it's kind of like that. It's like that brash, like, you know, we have to get it done and we have to get it done now. And even though like we got one thing done, like the fight never stops kind of situation. That's, you know, he's almost like that kind of politician. I feel like, okay, maybe I said Trump was like the wrong word. I'll say Luthen's like a Bernie. And then he fights, he just wants to keep fighting and wants to get as many people like on his side. It's just his tactics are a little unpopular.
And I feel like it's more like, I feel like it's more where if you want to get people to your cause and if you want to have people to actually do something that seems impossible, which is overthrowing the emperor and the empire, then you have to have as many people as possible. And Saw's vision is much more like, let's just ride him out. I'm here for till I die, like 30 years, 20 years, 15 years, however long it is, but I'm
like
waiting.
Biden.
Yeah, but he's willing to wait, right? Where it's more like let's wait, let's be committed to the cause, let's do a little, you know, rebellious activity here and there, but let's ride this wave out. Let's be ready for, you know, like the emperor is getting old kind of ideology, right? Where it's like, he's an old man, let's just keep waiting and we'll eventually strike when the time is right. Whereas Luthen is much more like, let's get it now, let's go. Because if we don't go now, the empire is going to become so damn powerful, we're not going to have any chance to overthrow him. And I think that's what he says in that scene as well, where he's like, dude, they're getting so powerful. If we don't act now, and if we don't start recruiting other people now, then we're not going to be able to overcome them. So either way, it's incredible. It's an incredible scene. And I felt like the Mon Mothma stuff too, we hardly mentioned it too, some pretty good stuff as well.
That was great. I felt like that was really great because I think it touches on the fact that, you know, the elites are so out of touch and so out of the bubble. Like the fact that they're talking about these intense political issues. And it would cut back
to the prison.
Yeah. Where we actually see the actual suffering and pain being taken place. And these people are just like chatting, sitting around, like sipping on drinks like, and laughing about it.
I don't know if it was a little higher. It's nice, but you know, I was like, oh my God.
Right. It's the compare and the contrast. And the fact that they're sitting there talking about policy, like, and they're talking about whether or not the merits of the empire's actions are like justified or not, where they have no actual means of the consequences. Like you said, like the one dude was like, oh, you know, I'm not doing anything wrong. So what's the problem? That's the exact kind of ideology that led us down the road of the Patriot Act, by the way, you know, which was pushed by George Bush and the Republicans back when 9/11 happened. So it's like, Yeah, like that the whole general elitist mentality of like, oh, it's not affecting us, so we shouldn't care. It's very, very heavy here, and I thought it was good to see it play out here today in this episode too.
Yeah, so much this episode. The episode ends with Deidre torturing that one homie who's friends with Bix, who's friends with Cassian, back on Ferrix. So back on Ferrix, it's going crazy now that Deidre has command. And we see there's one moment, because all this time we've seen Deidre be this committed imperialistic worker, but now we see her be straight up evil or be straight up gangster when she does that scene where she's like, I want to see this guy get tortured. And then when she shows up, I want her to see him. And then she played stupid when she walked in and was like, oh no, like she shouldn't have seen this. Get him out of here. Get him out of here. Like, and she was kind of playing kind of good cop, bad cop in that same moment. And I was like, okay, now we're seeing the Empire's true colors, right? Where if you want to get your hands dirty and do all this stuff, you can't play nice. You're going to be who you are. And she's showing her true face, which her true face is just damn evil, in my opinion. I don't know. I've always thought that Deidre was evil. I don't have any, feelings like some other people on Twitter do for these imperialistic people. But I thought that scene was key to show you, like, hey, just in case you weren't aware, she's not a good person. What'd you think of that scene?
No, I thought that was great. I mean, I love Deidre's character all the way around in this series. I love seeing her step up and like get. I just love the whole arc. I love the whole arc. And even though it's tough watching Torture, because Torture's not great, it does kind of remind me. And it's funny because in the movie Zero Dark 30, they kind of almost like glorified Torture in a little bit of a way, and they kind of made it seem like that's the way we should do things to get things done.
That's what you took from that.
Well, I mean, that's what the movie was saying. I don't know what but like
that was so hard to watch for me.
No, I mean, it was hard to watch in that movie too, but it's funny because like it really does feel like Jessica Chastain in Zero Dark 30 a little bit. Like Deidre gives off that same kind of energy, that same kind of cold boss lady fact, and I just dig that. I even dig how in her interaction with what's homeboy's name again? Cyril, yeah. Like she was almost like punking him then too. Like, did you really do anything? Like, what'd you really do? Like, I don't have time to keep wasting with you, homie. Like, he has to keep like advocating for himself. It's just all really good stuff.
Yeah, she's wild, man. I feel like, I don't know, man. I feel like this show is one of the most clear examples in all of Star Wars history about the evils of the Empire and about the slow choking that Luthen says and how quick it's done and how it's done in a manner into which you don't understand and don't comprehend it, because it's all done so seamlessly and so easily for the Empire that you're so easily brainwashed to believing that this is the right thing to do. And yes, the rebels are extreme, so we must take action and we must do this in order to protect our own people. And now I feel like the audience watching Andor are starting to slip into that mentality. I'm like, bro, it's so clearly an attack on this and saying how bad this is, and everyone's all like, yeah, I guess the rebels are kind of crazy. I don't know, man. That's what I'm seeing on Twitter, and I don't like it. But either way, I like this episode. I thought it was another incredible commentary on what's happening in the real world today and what could happen in the future. But those are our thoughts on Andor. Let us know what you thought in the comments down below. You can follow me at Squad Leader Ace, RB3. You
can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Director RB3, and stream Timestamp on Amazon.
Make sure you guys do all that good stuff. But either way, guys, for the First Cut crew and for Sabacc the Block, we're going to be peacing out. So deuces.